So good evening, Rotarians and colleagues in peace. I am Jim Holderman, the chair of District 5450 Peace Committee, which is the sponsor of our forum for discussion. I'm quite excited tonight to introduce Dr. Anne Frisch. Anne is one of our international leaders in the movement away from nuclear weapons. If you've seen the movie in Oppenheimer and heard the very last line, that kind of sums up the importance of what we're doing. And I'm not going to be a breaker on that, so I won't tell you what it is, but you want to see the last line. You want to see the movie, it's phenomenal. Anne brings this extensive background. As mentioned in her bio, she was one of 5 individuals to be named Rotary International Peace Force Champion in Geneva Rotary UN meeting. I assume we have all read her broad background, so with no further story, Anne, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, I thought we'd do something different today. Sometimes the speaker is the source of argument and provocation, and everybody wants to debate her or him. And what I would like to request is that you use the chat extensively to put up remarks and comments about how you are responding to some of the different ways I'm engaging you in this nuclear weapons, shall we say, argument. I have some visuals. I do have an argument based on the 4-way test. I have some other ways to draw you in, which is my hope. And I would like you to tell me what you are, what is engaging you, what interests you, what is it that you're seeing, what slide maybe that makes you want to take action, or maybe you want to comment on something that just you just didn't get it. So I'm really working very hard to make presentations that are really engaging for Rotarians. And when I say engaging, I mean, I want them in the movement. And that doesn't mean they have to come and join us 24/7. Some of us actually are working almost that time frame, but to do something like just getting your core representative to vote yes. And we have 2 resolutions this year. And so put your comments in the chat also, so we'll have a record of what inspires you, if anything. I hope there will be something. What is it that moves you to action? So let me go to screen share if I can find it now. Oh yes, there it is. Little things have a way of getting away from us. Hang on just a minute, I got some things here. Okay, I am going to skip over one slide and I'll come back to it afterwards. But so here we are. We're going to talk about the 4-way test and what moves you to action.
Biz?
My Rotary Club is the We Rotary Satellite Club of International Peace, District 5000. If you don't know, that's out of Hawaii. And it does not get me any free trips to Hawaii, however, much to my dismay. Oops, now I need to do this right. Okay, I'm going to come back to that slide. Are you all able to see the full screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we have here a choice. Having a nuclear war or accident or catastrophe is not something that has to happen. Although a lot of people are very, what shall we say, fatalistic about doing anything about it. But in fact, we have choices on this. Most people do not like nuclear weapons and don't want them around, but they're very strong sentiment. Sometimes we could call it propaganda that we need nuclear weapons. So these are the choices, because nuclear weapons, even just a few of them, would not be good for the planet. So just so we have a baseline here of like, how many, frankly, do we have? We have them in different categories. Some are ready to be retired, shall we speak, dismantled, we hope. Some that are just lying around waiting to be called to active duty, and then around 3,000 between US and Russia that are actively ready to be used. And then of the about 6,000 that Russia and US have, here are the numbers from other countries, and we have heard that China is going to expand their nuclear weapons. Well, they would have to go a long way to reach this number. So to be shocked that China would be expanding its nuclear weapons, and of course, so are people in the US government. So we have UK at 225, Pakistan, India, Israel at 90, North Korea at 50. Any one of them, if they launch their entire arsenal, would be very serious damage to the world. So I want to take you just for a second into imagining a nuclear explosion in your city. Here we have the area of Golden, Colorado, Denver, and we're going to be looking at Denver County. I don't know exactly what the boundaries are, but you got some mountains, you've got some plains, and you got a very huge city. And this is what a nuclear blast looks like out of Denver. So in the center, the temperature is many thousand degrees and everything is incinerated. This is assuming a surface, a blast. There is a possibility of an air blast, which is a different constellation. This is a ground blast. But everything, people, animals, buildings, cars, trucks, roads, everything, trees, are just incinerated and they become just soot. In that next area outside of there, you have a heavy radioactivity, typical of a ground blast. It flows everywhere, and you look at all these little lakes and streams and mountains and valleys, and the radioactivity is just going everywhere. It's not something that's easily retrievable. It gets into the soil. It is generally very nasty stuff. And then in the outer area, you have semis on top of buildings and buildings on top of semis. It's generally chaotic, people screaming, wanting for help. And in the studies that the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons has done, they looked at major cities to see what kind of medical care would be available in event of a nuclear blast, and essentially not anything that you could count on. So for example, the hospitals will basically be demolished. The doctors will be dead or injured. Any doctor remaining would have a very, very long line of patients, but frankly, there's not going to be any place there would be having their consultations in the streets. And there will be basically medicine, if any, is probably also demolished in the hospitals. Now you might think that, well, people will come to the rescue, but the landing strips will likely also be demolished, not usable. We could say maybe some helicopters could come in, but frankly, anybody is going to think twice before they take a helicopter into the zone. And remember, we're only talking about one single blast, which is probably a result of a mistake. So you have generally a very, very chaotic situation in Denver County. This is a larger area than Denver, but about 1.5 million people would be killed instantly and about 750,000 injured. in central area, where the radioactivity is most intense, most people would eventually die, and mostly sooner. So what might be likely is a nuclear weapon from east of Denver County and one of the states of, say, Wyoming or Montana and North Dakota, where there are several thousand nuclear weapons. And they're in silos like this, and there have been problems. And if a single nuclear weapon went off, it would be likely because there was some kind of mistake. When I talked about soot, this is what it looks like. And a very fine study by Zia and Robach analyzed data and calculated that 100 nuclear weapons in the area of Pakistan and India, the soot and radioactivity would block the sun for several decades. It's what we used to call nuclear winter a few decades ago, but it is genuinely a nuclear winter. There are no crops grown. Oh my gosh, I got a phone call. Probably somebody calling me to find out where the links are in your email. Essentially, you have hunter-gatherer stage of life. It would be eating wild pigs, radioactive wild pigs, and wild blueberries. Princeton, a few years ago, it was about 2019, it was just before COVID, issued a study, and they gathered data. They have a very fine department there on security, global security. And they gathered all the data on nuclear weapons, what countries had what weapons, where they were positioned, how many were ready to launch, and what was the political situation. And I guess you would not be surprised to know that their calculation on the World War III end of the world was Eastern Europe. And the scenario was, as they guessed it, that the Russian soldiers in Kaliningrad, just across the border, perceived that US NATO was about to launch a nuclear weapon pointed at them, and they launched one. And because of the automatic nature of some of these weapons, but also the instant decisions that have to be made, you have millions of people dead by the end of the day. Essentially, we spoke about 100 nuclear weapons blocking the sun for a couple decades. With the launching of essentially all the world's nuclear available weapons, you would have a much far worse situation. Now, it looks like South America and Africa and some parts of Antarctica might be spared. Then they might be spared the buildings falling over, but in fact, there is only one sun, and when it blocks the sun, it blocks it for everybody. So it would not, it would essentially be World War III over in one day for the shortest war on history of the country. So we have to say, in understanding this disaster, who's paying the bill for this? And the answer is we are, not just in the United States, but everywhere in the world. It's not magic money. It's not something people can produce. It just, by wanting it, they have to have somebody willing people to pay for it. And it seems that the American people are just willing to pay for it. And we do have some very solid data from Physicians for Social Responsibility in Los Angeles. They have a very nice website that calculates how much we spent in the data I'm going to give you is for 2022 using per capita income. So I want to tell you how much you all pay there in Golden, Colorado, in the Denver County. So the per capita income for Denver County is $50,642 with a population of 711,000. And each person is paying $364 for nuclear weapons, and that's for new nuclear weapons, present nuclear weapons, maintenance, and all kinds of things. But what happens is not only just the loss of personal money, but the money that $260 million leaves Denver County in a single year, the 2022, never to return, except it's destined to threaten and destroy other people. So this is something that is starting to be used as a reason, as a way to appeal to municipalities and say, hey, look at the bill we're paying for nuclear weapons. So even per capita income of $32,000 a year would be paying around $270 just for nuclear weapons. So I think that's something that is a consideration, that not only are we paying the bill, but essentially for our own demise. So the question for Rotarians, we claim to have a four-way test. And so I'm going to walk you through the four-way test for this. First, we're going to look for some truths and see if there are any. What should we be thinking about nuclear weapons? So first of all, nothing bad has happened since 1945. Let me back up there. Therefore, nothing bad is going to happen again. Well, I'm sorry. There have been lots of accidents and miscalculations. So let me give you just three. Damascus, Arkansas, this is a very famous case. There was a movie made out of it. A worker in one of those silos that I showed you dropped a tool and pierced the casing of a Titan II ICBM. Leak, fire, and the conventional part of the weapon caught fire. Fortunately, the nuclear warhead did not, but wow, ooh, lucky, ooh, we're okay at the end of the day. One person lost his life in that event. And you have Grand Forks, North Carolina, where there are a couple thousand nuclear weapons, right to the west of Minnesota, being a target essentially for enemy weapons. A B-52 bomber carrying 12 hydrogen bombs. Can you imagine? Try to get your head wrapped around this. Engulfed in a fire for 3 hours, risking a chain reaction. I mean, these were probably not armed, but the conventional missiles that they caught on board could also contage the nuclear weapons. So, but at the end of the day, oh gosh, we were lucky. In 1968, the Scorpion, a torpedo believed to be carrying 2 nuclear torpedoes, sank in the Atlantic, never to be seen again. Well, lucky, nothing bad happened there, except they all lost their lives and took a couple nuclear weapons with them. But so to say nothing bad ever happened, no, there were just a stream of terrible things. A couple nuclear weapons landed in North Carolina, down there by Quanta, and one of them went into the earth and has not been seen since. The other one landed in a tree. So 3 of they had some fail safes on it, and 3 of them worked and 1 of them didn't. So you say, oh my gosh, ooh, lucky, huh? So forget that. If people ever say to you that, and honestly, they do say that to me, nothing bad has happened since 1945. We dropped the bombs and there must be nice balance. No, there are accidents and miscalculations just waiting to happen every day, and we won't know. So if people say that, that's not right. That's not true. So secondly, we need these weapons to back up our military. Well, yeah, I guess that's what you do. If you have a military, you have to give them weapons. However, You don't have to give them nuclear weapons. Some of them, military commanders, just don't want them. And the reason is they come back to bite you. So Ward Wilson, who is a member of our satellite club, has written a book. It's going to be published on October 24th, and I hope you'll take a look at it. So what he says is, no, most military commanders don't like it, but that doesn't mean that some might not want to do it. I mean, we did drop some bombs, and they were done very rationally to ward the Soviets off, by the way, not because to get Japan to surrender, they'd already surrendered, but it was a good story anyway. It made people love nuclear weapons. So if people say that to you, tell them, no, that's not right. So the nuclear countries will never give them up. Well, that's just patently not true. South Africa gave theirs up very early in the game. They said, too antiquated, too expensive, too messy. We don't want them. And then United States and the Soviet Union in the 1980s and 90s got together, and they said, these things are really crazy. I had a Rotarian who worked in the Secret Services. He claims that they didn't give it up because 1 million people were in Central Park screaming about get rid of those things. It's because they understood the danger and they started getting rid of them. So if you hear people say that, just tell them, no, that's not true. Just go ahead and say it. So nuclear weapons are security. This is the first argument or the truth that we're going to look at. They deter aggression against us. The more we have, the more secure we are. That's the deterrence idea. But, and it's very appealing. This really bolsters people's sense of, we got really a lot of them, but we don't have as many as Russia. So we need some more because then we'll be more secure. But frankly, nuclear weapons just really don't care what you think about them. They operate on their own, their physical instruments, they operate as they are planned to operate. And they really don't care what we think of them. So, however, the appealing part is, let's say North Korea. North Korea tolerated US intrusions into their security for, 50 years after the Korean War. The war has still not been, the peace has not been made with North Korea. They finally got really pissed off and they left the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and they said, we're going to build nuclear weapons. So they must have been thinking that, they really needed some security there. So I'll admit that people think people think they're going to get some security. But remember this, classical psychology tells us that when people are threatened, they will respond in a couple different ways. One is they will get more threatening and more ballistic, shall we say. And the other is we assume, though, that they will back off. That's the second way that people typically, according to psychologists, respond to threat. Now, the psychologists didn't get around to nonviolent action and conscious rational strategy, but let's give it to them that there are two ways. But the assumption behind this is that there's only one way, and that is if I threaten you, you'll back off. That's really not even been my life experience, though I don't usually go around threatening people. So, but let's just pretend that there's enough truth of it to go through the four-way test. So let's walk through this. Would it be fair to all concerned? No. My colleagues, when we're at the United Nations and we hear these countries say, 9 nuclear nations say they can have nuclear weapons for their security, but why they don't want me to have nuclear weapons? Iran, for example, we need our security too. So why can't we have nuclear weapons? So it's not fair to all concerned. It's a policy that gives the power to the powerful. Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Probably not. There's there's no data of any kind that would show that if you threaten people with a really powerful weapon, whether they back off or whether they turn ballistic, that they will be better friends, or the people in their country. Think about Rotary International meetings. Have you ever been to a meeting with a Russian, or did you stop to talk to them if they were there? We have some Rotary clubs there. There are, when I went to Toronto, there were 66 Rotary clubs in China, and I stopped and talked to them and I made friends with them. But they're not very visible in Rotary. We don't make friends with them because our whole governmental structure is now preparing us to go to war with them. And the way they're doing is by demonizing them. So would it be beneficial to all concerned if 9 nuclear countries continue to have nuclear weapons? Would it be beneficial to all? No. 9 have their security, supposedly, and we have none. I don't think so. But let's suppose we turned it around and said, would dismantling all nuclear weapons eliminate the possibility of nuclear war? Yes, it's pretty clear that we would not have nuclear war. We still have nuclear reactors, and they are very dangerous, and as we know, they can be used in war, but it's not going to end humanity as we know it. Would it be fair to all concerned? Absolutely. You have a level playing field. Nobody gets to have security because they have nuclear weapons. Will it build goodwill and better friendships? I think so. Even if you have wars and you have people killing each other, I think it's still even better if when you engage with somebody from China or Russia as American citizens, that the possibility of engagement is better when their country cannot end life on the planet. So beneficial to all concerned? Yes, we're not going to have a nuclear war. That clearly will be a benefit to all. So a couple of decades ago, some people like Rotarians did in Havana in 1940. They made a statement very uncharacteristic to Rotary conventions, and they said people should have human rights, and that became, and a few years later, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Wow, what a Rotarians did that. And then the Rotarians worked to create a United Nations, and they were not alone, but they did a lot and got some credit for moving ahead the idea of the United Nations. So here we are, and what we're doing is trying to get rid of nuclear weapons. And we have been, Rotarians have been on the inner circle in creating this treaty. And what it does is, people say, well, it's not going to work. It's just another treaty like all the other treaties. It's just not going to work because the nuclear nations will not join. Well, basically, maybe they won't, maybe they will, and maybe they won't. But they can, even if they have nuclear weapons. They have to turn them offline, turn the switch. They have to make them inoperable. Well, that would be a good plan for the whole world right there. Just turn them off. Dismantle them later, but just let's stay safe. But what this treaty does, it says countries that join, now these are mostly non-nuclear countries, but non-nuclear in the sense that they don't have nuclear weapons. So they're not possessing, threatening, or using nuclear weapons. However, this treaty goes farther. It says you can't build them, manufacture them, you can't produce them, you can't host other countries' nuclear weapons, you can't build widgets for them. You can't finance them. And that obligation is from a government to anything that they have control over. So governments have a lot of control over taxation and securities and things like that. So they literally can force the people in their countries not to build widgets for nuclear weapons. So some of us, we already have 12 appointees to go to the second meeting of states parties. Francis Jeffries and I were there for the first meeting of states parties in Vienna. It was real thrill. This is a treaty built by people, young people, women and men, and survivors of the testing. By the way, 2,000 nuclear bombs were dropped on people, mostly indigenous, low power people we can bomb and get away with it. And by the way, the bombs are pretty bad. They leave radioactivity, just like when done through mallets. So then something we can really be proud of, but Rotary doesn't say too much about it, is, and in June of 2021, Rotary International divested from nuclear weapons. And he did it in the context of divesting from fossil fuels, divesting from funds that hurt women and girls, and divesting from funds that harm our efforts for diversity and inclusion. This is a really forward, brave, courageous action that quite a fairly conservative organization like Rotary board has done. And they did it because Rotarians said, you're gonna do this. So I want to close with a tribute to a Soviet commander who made it possible for all of us to be here today. Without him, we probably would have had a nuclear war. So in 1983, Stanislav Petrov, a lieutenant colonel, got news from some of his staff that the US had launched 5 nuclear weapons and they were headed for Russia and the Soviet Union, and they had to make a decision in just a few minutes. And Stanislav said, why would they do that? We're not at war with them. It's 1983, for crying out loud. We're not their enemy. They're not our enemy. So it must be a mistake. It must be a computer mistake. He said, I'm not going to pass this information along, because if he did, somebody else might have made a decision to launch. So he kept quiet. And guess what? They found out it was just a computer thing. Nobody can tell me exactly what happened, but there are a couple stories. One is there was in their primitive computers, which we had back in 1983. We did have some that weren't very good, but we did have our ways of getting this kind of information. Some kind of reflection on a satellite made it look like nuclear weapons had been launched. Another story was that somebody had posted a training tape of US soldiers planning to launch nuclear weapons at Russia, but it was just pretend. So whatever it was, I can't get a story. I'm not quite sure why, but he died in 2017. He was never rewarded or punished for the failure to not launch the end of the world. So thank you, Stanislav. So we are back to our first question here, and that is, so what are we going to do about it? So here are some of the people who have been involved, and you probably are, so many of you are up there. Kenan from Uganda has just joined, and his picture is up at the upper right, and all the people who have helped us with the core resolution. People have worked from Sweden and Pakistan and all over the world. And we are so proud, but they're only a small number of the people who have helped us move this forward. So I want to give you a few possible action items to think about, and then I want to listen to you, and you tell me, did any of these arguments or images move you to take some action, or any other comments you want to make to inform me on how to better educate Rotarians. So one of the things you can do is ask your core representatives to vote yes in October. We have 2 resolutions. They're very similar. They come from different groups. And so we can get to 50%, 51% this year. Rotary will just have some obligation. It doesn't force them to do anything. But we would like Rotary to step into the big world. I want to tell you, when we go to the UN and we say we're Rotarians, and they after they pick themselves up off the floor, they say, "Oh, Rotary is here," and we say, "Well, not Rotary, but Rotarians. We are members of Rotary clubs, and we're here because we want to work on disarmament." And so, but they're just so thrilled and so stunned that anybody from a business and professional organization that's known to be pretty conservative is here. One of our members of our satellite club, Medea Benjamin, is the founder of Code Pink. And if you go to codepink.org, you can get yourself connected in a way that really helps you to ask basically your legislators to basically stop making war and make peace. I'm on Code Pink probably a couple times a week. Then there was another bill, and Quanta and Teresa, along with Medea Benjamin and Christine Ann, the latter two are both members of our satellite club. They hosted a rally at the Capitol, and there is a bill in Congress and the House now, 1369. And we ask you to call your representative and say, please sign on. It's a very good bill. It asks for humanitarian access to their families, to reunify families. It opens up doors for cultural exchanges, and it asks the US government to appoint somebody to make peace with North Korea. It's really quite a very nice bill. Ask your congressperson to sign on to HR 77. This really is asking Congress to move us forward to nuclear weapons abolition by adopting some of the principles of the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. And I would say, please sign up for End War 101. Rotary Action Group for Peace is now going to do it again. And come and join us as a civil society observer. It's one of the most exciting things of my life, being able to talk with delegates and listen to the deliberations, and help me and all of us in this effort to how do we reach Rotarians. And then I would love for you to sign the petition that we have to support the Japanese survivors' appeal. Basically, all of these things. And I want to actually go back 1 moment. I want to point out that it's important to consider yourself an actor as a power of one. And if you look up here on the left-hand side, can you see my cursor, that rotary wheel there? That's Bob Smith, and I don't think he's on the call today, but he was invited. Bob Smith walked into the Atlanta RI convention with a single sheet of paper that said, we call on Congress to abolish nuclear weapons, and he had space for 25 signatures. And so we started that petition around. And then Marcia Hunt and Rudy Westervelt and Karen Westervelt and Al Jubitz, we got together and we said, well, I think, yeah, we probably should do something. And then they said, and Ann, you're the person who gets to do this. So I want to say to you, the power of one means stand up in your Rotary Club and say, let's bring Christine on to our Rotary Club and hear what she's doing. Let's take the course. Let's be a civil society observer. Let's send somebody to New York City in November. So I especially want to thank all of you who stepped up to make this happen, and all of you new people that I haven't met before. I'm so happy you're here, and especially happy to Jim Halderman for making these presentations available so we can learn about the things we need to know to be good Rotarians. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if you have any comments for me and any of these things appeal to you. I want to introduce you to my daughter, who is behind her photo there. She is down with my granddaughter while we are enjoying being at Rensselaer University.
And there's a couple. What I would like to do is, if I could ask Bob Maroney to present his thoughts.
Thank you. I can find nothing wrong with the idea of banning nuclear weapons. I can find nothing wrong with the idea of banning war in general. But I must admit, I'm a bit cynical, because if you look at the history of the United States and what we've tried to do as a concerted effort of the people of the United States with the government, we've not done very well. If you start off with the League of Nations, which was supported by Wilson, they said, oh, let's ban war. Let's not have war. Long before we had nuclear weapons. And a huge number of countries around the world signed up, and the United States refused to sign up. And then later there was the
Kellogg-Briand. Yep.
Briand plan. And again, more than 15 nations signed on to that, including the United States. But when it came push to shove, there were no methods in the plan that would enforce it. And so when Japan attacked Manchuria, everybody just sort of shrugged and nothing happened. And if you look at things like the efforts to ban just simple things, let's not get worried about nuclear weapons. Let's just ban something obvious like landmines. The United States has not even bought into banning landmines, despite the fact of the huge number of civilians that have been killed by it. I remember visiting Cambodia many years ago, and a whole corner of Cambodia was unallowed for tourists to go into because there were so many landmines. And
yes, so let me jump in here, Bob, because your message is very loud and clear, and you feel very, very discouraged that we citizens of the world, we just can't pull it off. I guess maybe I would turn to suggest End War 101 and see if that will help. Go reach out to Christine Ahn, because they have very good strategy. They're doing this very quietly, very carefully, very respectfully. And there are other people working on US-North Korea relationships. Some people that we met this weekend were saying, this is one small mistake, just a small mistake, could be devastating out of North Korea. And yet North Korea in 2018, they told President Moon and South Korea, hey, we'll get rid of our nuclear weapons. We just want our security. And we'll put them offline if the US will just talk to us and start engaging in this process. So, we need to think differently. We need to think about how other people see it. We have to counteract our own disinformation. It is so powerful that we believe stuff that's utterly not true, and it's all in all the history books. And you're absolutely right. It's very discouraging. But hey, we're the people who ended polio, so you got to have a little hope there. And I think the fact is we really have no choice. We did get US and Russia, and I believe 1 million people in Central Park really made a big difference. African-American community was very large in that debate. And the only problem was we stopped short. And as I understand it, President Reagan wanted to keep Star Wars, and Gorbachev said, well, what's the point? So they didn't get rid of all of them. So we got to be on top of this and keep learning about it, and not let our discouragement stop us from acting.
We have a lot of questions. I'd like Dennis Wong, you were on top.
Thank you very much. And one of the things is just follow up on the last question and comment about the United States. We you and I are the United States. We're the people. And generally the general public, Americans, don't seem to be as concerned about nuclear weapons as other things. And so I just wondered our approach to this situation. Do we need some new ideas and approaches on how to address this issue? Question mark. Because it doesn't seem like what we're doing now is working well enough and fast enough to where we can have a world free of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I'd really like
one
to
of the
move
things that-
back to what you saw in my presentation that moved you or didn't move you to do something. Nobody is asking anybody to do everything. We just have to keep this needling our government and asking them to do things until we achieve the same momentum that we did in 1983.
There's also 1,000 different peace organizations working that did not exist 20 years ago. So there is a momentum. Barbara Mueller.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that Ending War 101 was carefully crafted. It didn't just happen. We've had our beta tests. We've had 270 Rotarians sign up for the first course. It begins again September 4th. And it's a really important contribution to your own arguments, to your own well-being, because it shows you what war is costing us. Now, we do have a few positive things, that the Rotary International has agreed to de-invest in some of the programs that were making them money, but were harming the planet. This is your opportunity to thank John Hugo. This is your opportunity to thank our new international president who believes in hope. We can't have hope if we have all these nuclear weapons hanging around. So I go with the point, use your voice, call them up, leave a message if they don't answer, or write a letter. Letters are amazing. People read them. I write emails all the time on programs that I believe our United States should bring forth, and I get answers, believe it or not. And then the last little thing is watch what you're thinking. Never think it's impossible. As Nelson Mandela said, it always seems impossible until it's done. And I'm going to give you a new definition for impossible. I''M possible. And if you just remember that, we are the people. And my husband, Assistant Secretary General, 40 years at the UN, never gave up his idea that hope and peace are possible. So with that, Anne, I want to thank you for this marvelous presentation. I took pictures of several of your slides because I knew I needed them. And I really thank you for showing us the devastation it could cause. Thank you.
And for every negative, always add to yourself up until now. Don Quanta.
Thank you. I wanted to actually address something Jim Haldeman just said, that we have now thousands of peace organizations. While that is true, that when there's a coordination between all of them so that we can show the collective power, because right now it's kind of fragmented, so more invisible. But when we come together is when we are going to really make a great impact. So I was wondering, for instance, I just came this afternoon from another meeting with Massachusetts Action for Peace. They're having a twin threats, which is they are putting nuclear war as well as the climate change together, which is really wonderful. As a matter of fact, I just sent them an email and included Anne in it. I do think we have to find a way to coordinate and consolidate all this power that is at this time fragmented into 1,000 pieces, as Jim Haldeman just mentioned. Thank you.
And yes, the more we can tear down silos and call it synchronicity, the better, the quicker will happen. Richard Denton.
Thank you very much, Jim, and thank you very much, Anne, for your presentation. Just a couple other examples of hope. Back in 54 and 1955, various people here in Canada, Dr. Ursula Franklin was our tooth fairy, and you also had one in the States. And they measured strontium-90 in baby teeth. And so a few scientists published a paper in 1963, and that got the nuclear countries that were testing, namely Russia, the US, Great Britain, to only to sign the partial test ban treaty, which meant that they would test underground. So again, a very few people were able to change things. When you look at nuclear weapons history, again, back in the 80s, we had over 70,000, and now we're down to around 13,000. So we can get rid of nuclear weapons. And as Anne said, South Africa is another example of that. I love what you just said, I'm possible. And also right now, of course, there's the mission, the movie Mission Impossible, which again shows that it is possible by the end of the movie. So things can change.
Thank you. Teresa?
Yes, I'm going to be pretty brief about this because I know that there's probably a big movement that's supposed to be organized on these 2 points. But from the organization and event that we went to this past weekend, there were 2 items that they brought up that individuals can do. And if all individuals do it, it can make a big impression. One is to write letters to the editors of our local newspapers about how we feel about nuclear weapons and how that particularly impacts the situation in North and South Korea. And we had not mentioned that there's a travel ban now that's been added to the problems that the people there have being able to communicate with each other when communication is so important. And leading from that is the fact that cultural exchanges have worked in the past, and that we should all be looking for opportunities to actually initiate some sort of cultural exchanges to overcome the impasse between North and South Korea, and in any countries that we have conflict or problems. It has worked in the past where it unravels that distrust and brings about an opportunity to make the communications flow and the interactions people to people work better.
Great. I want to explain something that Anne brushed over very quickly, and that was to sign up for CORE or to vote for CORE. What she was talking about is referred to as the Council on Resolution. Every year, one delegate of your district is that there is each of your district will have one delegate or one representative who will be a member of the council and will have one vote on that. And so if you are interested in the council getting voted to pass in favor of the TPNW, you want to find out who your district delegate is and call that individual and plead the case with them to vote in its favor, or however you wish it to be voted. But the job is first to find the delegate of your district and then persuade them.
I think your sound is making echo because other mics are open.
Thank you, Quanta. Oh, I was gonna say one more thing. Oh, every city council has public comments prior to the meeting. So we in Santa Barbara are organizing to make a comment about ending nuclear weapons, ending war 101. And so we have a delegate that goes to every single Tuesday afternoon meeting. So we have a public comment, which is televised, and because they're lacking stuff on their government channel, they play that meeting over and over again. So that's number one. And number two, I'm trying to think, there's one more thing. Oh, become an international city of peace. If you are not an international city of peace, in Santa Barbara, our United Nations Association worked on the form. It's a simple one-page form. And we're number 323 for an international city of peace. So become an international city of peace. And, think of everything you can possibly do to bring your city on board for peace, right? And these meetings, invite your friends to, Jim has the best speakers. So always bring your friends with you. And you're recording this, right, Jim?
I am recording this and happy to share with anybody who would like at any time.
Do we just
Yes.
send you an email?
And send me an email. I'll be more than happy to forward this on.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? And it looks like you were about to say something.
I was just going to ask again if anybody would comment on whatever moved them in my presentation. I hope there was something.
It was fabulous, Anne. It's always hard to do a conversation after where you hear such devastating news that the possibilities are there. But then that's when it inspires us to action, right, Tom? Tom and I are on this committee for ending War 101, and Richard Denton just joined us. And so you have to get involved with people who feel the same way you do. There's enough naysayers out there, but we need more of a team of peace is possible and make it possible. And people say, Barbara, we already have peace. I stop at a red light. Well, sure, you stop at a red light, but that's not going to help us end nuclear weapons. So let's get the nuclear weapons off of our possibility list. And you really brought that home tonight. Thank you.
Richard?
And just following up on what Barbara had said, we're having difficulty influencing our federal governments in whatever country, but at a municipal level, which is the politics that is closest to the people, we definitely can have an influence. And so in the States, you can get your city to become a city of peace, as Barbara says. You can get them to join Back from the Brink, which is another organization with 5 points. You can hear and around the world, again, you can join the ICANN Cities Appeal, which is, again, getting your city to endorse the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. So in Canada, we now have 19 cities that have done that, from all the major cities to much smaller municipalities. I've done that here in Sudbury, little place like Parry Sound, their Rotary Club got that done, as well as the big cities like Toronto, Winnipeg, Montreal, Halifax, Vancouver, Victoria. So at a municipal level in your own community, you can make a difference. Thank you.
Absolutely. That's beautiful.
Thank you. One of the, sometimes it's difficult to start at the top and work down. Governments will follow the people when the people act and when the people speak. So we at least need to, each of us, go out and convince one other person and 2 other people. We need to spread the word and become a groundswell. Governments will follow. So I'm less worried about that. But Anne, we've come to an end, and I want to thank you so much for sharing your extensive knowledge, and very thought-provoking and stimulating, if not challenging, to us all. We thank you so very, very much for bringing that to us. The slides, I was intrigued with the numbers, who has the numbers, and it's just each one of the slides were valuable. But we're also very excited to announce next month's speaker on the forum for discussion. September will bring us Kristen Ann, who led 30 peacemaking women walk across the DMZ from North Korea to South Korea to help bring peace. Along with attempting to bring North and South Korea back together in communication, she's working for the U.S. to declare we are not at war with North Korea. The U.S. and Korea signed an armistice, which is merely a temporary ending, not a final ending. The U.S. is still at a declared war with North Korea. It is time for us to end that. You won't want to miss Christine Ann and the phenomenal work she is doing and has done around the world. And again, I thank you all for showing. And again, Ann, we thank you very much for your effort, your work, and what you bring to the world.
I put my contact in the chat if any of you want to set me straight on anything or want to explore some opportunities, because remember, peace, ending war is a challenge. And so you have to start somewhere and you need colleagues to do that. There was a retired general at the conference in Washington, D.C., where Christine Ann held a rally, and he was working all by himself to get peace in Korea for like 10, 15 years until he met Christine. They have very different analyses of the problem, and they're working together to get peace on the Korean peninsula. And it's a very simple, so I really encourage you to go and contact your legislators and say, we want peace on the Korean peninsula, because there are quite a few who have signed on already. They understand it could make a huge difference in Asia to have one country at peace, because what's going to happen is without this threat, North Korea is not going to feel so committed to keeping nuclear weapons. But remember, nobody's asking the US to get rid of their nuclear weapons. Only they want those bad guys to get rid of theirs. So what we need is peace first. And Christine is just the person to listen to, and I will certainly be there.
It will be valuable. And we've come to an end. Quanta, I will give you 2 minutes.
Oh, 1 minute. I was going to ask Anne, why don't you show that picture that you were going to offer
Right,
Christine and
I can do
Yeah.
that. There, let's see, where is, I have to go backwards
We
here.
need a planet to live on, that's for sure.
So how did this happen? Christine Ann called me up and she said, Ann, you wanted me to join Rotary, and I decided it's time that I did that. So Christine Ann is at the left. There's Teresa Roloff, who was in this meeting. There's Quanta Dawn Light, who was in this meeting. A woman who is the daughter of a Rotarian, Medea Benjamin from Code Pink, that I recommended to, and me. And we made a huge presence at that conference. And we learned a whole lot that we're going to bring into our work. So keep in mind, all this initiative started with one person, Bob Smith. He checks in with me to find out how things are going on, but all he did was bring that one petition to Atlanta RICon. So I want to tell you, as discouraged as we get, it's the power of one, it's the power of six, it's the power of everything that ever gets done. And what we want is to be able to say, we made a difference. And barring that, if we fail to do it, that I wonder if I could have made a difference.
Mhm.
And we thank you. I do like to honor our agreement of time. And so we
Yes.
thank you all very, very much for coming tonight. And Anne, again, it was fantastic. Thank you.
Yes, thank you too.